Our podcast and our company, is focused on the world of fine art and oftentimes artists with works in various museums. An achievement of yours that I think is super interesting is that the Museum of Modern Art in New York bought both of your films that won the Sundance Grand Jury Prize. Share your thoughts on the idea of a museum acquiring your films, and what does it mean to have your work considered important enough to sort of add to the annals of art history?
Yeah, I almost fell off my chair. I mean, we had gone through winning Sundance, by unanimous jury, and that was thrilling and surreal. Super grateful for that. But then we're at New Films, New Directors, which is a festival in New York that's put on by Lincoln Center in partnership with the Museum of Modern Arts. And we were at dinner, and the woman from the Museum of Modern Art was like, "Hey, we'd love to acquire Dig for our permanent collection." And I had never heard something so incredible.
Hello, and welcome back to the MO Podcast. I am your host, Joey Flores, here as always with my co-host, Jonathan Neal. Today, we are honored to have a true pioneer in documentary filmmaking join us on the pod. Ondi Timoner holds the unique distinction of being the only director to win the Sundance Film Festival's Grand Jury Prize twice. The first was with Dig in 2004, which was a raw portrayal of the tumultuous relationship between two fast-rising bands, the Brian Jonestown Massacre and the Dandy Warhols. In 2009, she won the prize again with We Live in Public, an examination of internet privacy and surveillance. Her films are not only critically acclaimed, but also culturally significant, with both Dig and We Live in Public being acquired by New York's Museum of Modern Art for their permanent collection. Ondi and my path crossed originally when Ondi began following my company, Earbits, for her web series about innovative startups. The last time I saw Ondi was at an LA screening of her 2022 film, Last Flight Home, which was an intimate documentary chronicling her father, Eli Timoner's final days and his decision to utilize California's end-of-life option. The film has been described as the most riveting and raw documentary by The Forward, offering a profound meditation on love, loss, and autonomy. Earlier this year, Ondi released All God's Children, in an unprecedented attempt to heal centuries of racism, anti-Semitism, and combat the rising racial and ethnic tension in their Brooklyn communities. Activist Rabbi Rachel Timoner teams up with Baptist Reverend Robert Waterman to unite their congregations. All God's Children follows their journey, offering a powerful blueprint for how other communities might bridge divides and foster true unity. In her truly prolific nature, she also released The In-Between, which shines a light on a unique end-of-life facility that offers the unhoused a chance to die with dignity. And now she's back with Dig XX, the extended cut of her legendary documentary Dig, which turns 20 this year. We're thrilled to dive into her storied career, her creative process, and what she's learned along the way. Ondi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
Thanks for joining us. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Ondi, so you've been involved in lots of films as both a producer, executive producer, writer, director, etc. As a director, which documentary was the most enjoyable for you to make?
Wow, what a question. I mean, enjoyable is a tough one. To say Last Flight Home was enjoyable, obviously losing my father was very, very tough and scary. But those were some of the most beautiful moments I've ever had in my life, just of pure presence of a love, just love and just being with him and being able to spend that time with him and being able to sort of prove to him that he gave us everything. I felt very desperate when he said he needed to die. And I felt like if he died without knowing what he meant, it would be really, really, it would be impossible, in fact, to live on past that and to keep my kind of resiliency and spirit that I have. Just couldn't let him die like that. And so the fact that during that process, with all the Zoom calls and with all of the things that we did and all the visits and, really just stopping everything and taking those weeks with him to make sure he understood that his unconditional love was something that all of us shaped, all of us, his attitude, his way of paying attention to all of us, despite having been paralyzed for 40 years, that he became a role model and a hero to all of us. He finally absorbed that before he left this earth. And so I wouldn't say it was enjoyable, but it was really, really the most meaningful for sure. I mean, I can't imagine ever making a film more meaningful, and also for other people. Like the way the film just continues to help people has actually relieved my feeling of powerlessness and somewhat of shame for not being able to help my father all those years. Like, how is it that a man this great and this intelligent and wise, who started the fastest growing airline in the world, how can he be sidelined and bankrupted just because he had a stroke? It was like so hard for me as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 16-year-old, 26-year-old, 36-year-old. Like I couldn't do anything. And all I could do was just my own accomplishments and keep him abreast of that. And like, every time my plane landed, I would turn on my phone and the first call would be my dad checking in on the flight and how I am. And he had been tracking it from his chair. Allowing him to cheer me on was the best I could do, right? And taking his calls. And, so doing this, though he passed away, obviously, and maybe doesn't know that the film exists, or maybe he is watching like he promised. But doing this and allowing his experience and the wisdom he gained from it to heal so many people, to help so many people, has been the most cathartic experience of my life, and certainly taught me about the infinite power of film, which I had thought I had impacted people with Dig, or We Live in Public, or Brand, or Maplethorpe, or like all the many films, or Jungletown, the series. Like, I know people have written over the years and they've become artists or started bands or quit their jobs or whatever because of some of my films. And that's awesome. And that's why you make films, is to affect people. But nothing like this, with something that's so hard for people as losing loved ones and losing their own lives and fighting for terminally ill rights to be able to do medical aid in dying, is something that, has become a part of my life since then. So it's just, yeah, I'd say Last Flight Home far and away is the most important and meaningful.
What was the
They're
film
all
that you made?
enjoyable. I mean, they're all enjoyable, Joey, like at a certain point or another, and they're all really highly unenjoyable also at certain points.
What was
Like,
the film that
especially
you
in the
made
edit room.
right after Last Flight Home? Which film followed Last Flight Home in the making? Not necessarily release. What did you work on directly following?
My God, what a great question. Do you know the answer?
No, I don't. I'm asking.
My God. The New Americans Gaming a Revolution, which is
Okay.
on Netflix. It's on
And
Netflix. Check it
and
out. It's about it's about the fall, like the attempt to take down Wall Street with GameStop squeeze, and the insurrection on the Capitol, and how they happened weeks apart. When I realized they happened weeks apart and that they were all driven by memes and the internet and crypto and gaming and everything, looking at everything as a game. I mean, I went out and made sort of an update on We Live in Public 12 years later, which is The New Americans. And if I could find a polar opposite in every single way film, this is it, for
was
sure.
that by design, or you think that just it just happened, right? You needed something that was kind of sort of
You know
out
what?
there in online, distributed, kind of the opposite of being present with family and love and everything else. With like, what was it about making Last Flight Home that then made The New Americans the thing to make?
So I was filming Last Flight Home, which I wasn't meaning to be making a documentary. I was literally just taking care of my dad and terrified to forget a single word he said. So I set up cameras. So I didn't really know I was making a film, or I might not have said yes to The New Americans, because making them kind of at the same time was extremely challenging and kind of schizophrenic and hallucinogenic and just insane. It was like, I thought, well, this will be a good yin yang experience. They'll balance each other. No, it was like, I'm going from this like completely holistic love space into like white collar criminal Jordan Belfort. Not that he was a white collar criminal. He's amazing in this film, and he's not breaking the law as as far as I know right now, but he's amazing in the film. But that kind of thing, you know what I mean? It was just very, very different subject matter. But my dad had made it on Wall Street, he was at Lehman Brothers, and not that he was in Lehman Brothers, but he would go to Lehman Brothers and do these stock reports and do these money raises through Wall Street. And that was vital to him growing his businesses. First, Giffen Industries, which he took out of near bankruptcy and turned into had like 53 acquisitions and a massive company. And then he took that and started Air Florida, and within 10 years was on track to be the biggest airline in the world when he had the stroke, when his neck was cracked in a massage. He relied on Wall Street, and it was the one part of his story that I couldn't really understand, that finance and just that kind of thing just makes my eyes glaze over a lot. So I just was kind of like, I did the same thing with Cool It when I had a 7-year-old. My son was 7, and climate change was really beginning to be talked about because of an inconvenient truth, and people were feeling really hopeless and powerless. I was approached about making a film about climate change, and my first feeling was no, like, I don't want to know, kind of, and that's why I did it, was because we get to emerge with these PhDs in the subject matter, and with the New Americans, I just kind of I was approached about making a film about Wall Street bets. And I looked at it and I thought, that's kind of small. Like, it's a subreddit, it's a Reddit. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if this has enough legs to really dedicate what ultimately is always like about 2 years of your life minimum, to making one of these films. But then I was listening to my dad, and people were coming to visit him, and they were talking to him about Wall Street, and they were talking to him about his time in the business. And I've been working on a script about my dad, a scripted version of Last Flight Home, for 8 years at that point, now 10, now 11 years. And so I thought, I should probably maybe explore this so that I can understand my dad more, and this aspect of his life, which was so important. And also how Wall Street has changed, like, it wasn't like the cocaine snorting capital of the world, like you see in sort of Wolf of Wall Street or something, like when my dad was there, and what does it become, this thing that people revile to this extent, that they want to totally topple it. Like, 2008, 2009 crash of the stock market and the housing crisis. And so I started doing sort of a Big Short-esque sort of excavation of the, general discontent and mistrust of our government and Wall Street, and like the pillars of democracy, which is where we are now with Trump now being elected again. It's all very pertinent. It's all very pertinent. I recommend The New Americans. I want it. What's cool about it is that I told it in the language of memes. I told it in the language of the millennials and the gamers. And I just felt it was really important for people out my age and above to really understand what the mentality is, and that it's real and where it comes from. And so, we went into crypto and everything. And it was really, really intense, because I would sort of I was shooting The New Americans, but I was realizing the movie about my dad had to become a movie. And so the footage of my dad had to become a movie because it was so profound what we went through that we had to share it with people, So I was shooting The New Americans and editing Last Flight Home in my spare time. It was crazy. So that's what I made after. If you've seen We Live in Public, you should, and you liked it, you should watch New Americans.
No, I have, and I did. Definitely will. This leads into, I want to ask a question about sort of how deeply you immerse yourself in the environments in which you're creating these documentaries. So I was watching Dig and, thinking a lot about that immersion that happens. And it reminded me, like, I thought a little bit about like these character actors, like, Val Kilmer, who became Jim Morrison and, ended up getting divorced from his wife because she just couldn't handle like who he was throughout the making of this movie, and how deep people go into these crafts. And so with Dig, I was watching it, and I'm realizing that, you essentially had to take on the same lifestyle as these touring bands, with all these like late nights and parties and scandals and drugs and all of these things. And for however many years you're following, the Dandy Warhols and the Brian Jamestown massacre, it's like, that was just as much a part of your life as the subjects you're following, although maybe you're not partaking, but you're certainly there and experiencing the energy and all of those things. So I'm curious, like, what does immersing yourself in a world like that, or any of these movies for such a period of time, like, how does it change you or your life? And how, what is it like being, sort of becoming a part of that world for a period of time? And do you feel like it, profoundly impacts you beyond, once the film's done and, released? Are you a changed person every time?
Sorry, Joey, to cut you off. Say the last part again.
I'm just wondering if you feel like you become if you're a changed person after every movie because of having to immerse yourself so deeply in the world that you're documenting.
100%. I mean, I love what I do. It's a very challenging and very, very intense path. I mean, if you spend, like come to one of a documentary lunch, with a bunch of people like me, very intense people who are like, adventurers, ultimate adventurers in life, because you really do have to give yourself over to the muse. But you emerge with just such a base of knowledge. You get a front row seat to ask anything you want, and go into these worlds you could never otherwise enter. It's so fulfilling on that level. It's so honoring and humbling to be able to journey inside people's deepest emotions and hearts and into moments that are so tough for them, to be there and to hold space or ask a question at exactly the right moment or stand back and not ask anything and just empathize. All of that is just a dance that you develop over years and years of doing it, I think, and it either comes naturally or doesn't also. But I would never trade my life journey for anyone else's. I mean, it has been such a trip, and each film totally leaves its mark on me. But I wish I had slept more. I should have. It's this weird feeling that the youth, when you're young, you feel like you can just like sleep when you're dead, but then you forget that if you don't sleep, then you die sooner. So I'm not sure. I hope it doesn't happen like that for me, but I pulled so many all-nighters throughout my career finishing movies for deadlines. And I do regret that a little bit. Though what happens when I'm editing is, there's the shooting, which is sort of the jump in, you give yourself over to the muse. The editing is where you really get into a flow state, and it's almost like the movie tells you what it wants to become, and you kind of have to, for me at least, I'm like a conduit, and I get into this state where it'll be, especially in the middle of the night, where it's just like flowing through me, and my hands almost can't keep up fast enough on the keyboard. And that is not the case with writing. Like when I write screenplays and stuff, I definitely get into a flow, but it's not the same thing. Editing on an Avid, like editing system or whatever, Premiere, like the idea of the thing is coming and talking to you. And I'm just like putting this puzzle together, and I have these ideas of like, oh my God, this would go so well with this other thing. I got to find that other thing, put that thing, then move this. And then it's like, this feels like it should be a montage right here. Suddenly I have like 17 different sequences going, and I don't feel like I can go to sleep before I finish them. And so it's led to a lot of sleepless nights. That's all. And Dig, I think we also were like stuck on the road and arrested. And, you're talking about Dig, you're talking about my 20s. There was definitely a lot of just putting ourselves in their positions with them, come what may, mom and dad not being able to reach us, no cell phones, off we go, and then a mountain of footage, 2,500 hours of footage. And it's like, I tried to hire so many different editors. Nobody could edit it because there was too much footage. So I ended up editing it, and that took 4 years. So we kept up with the story while editing. And so that's why. And then my brother edited the new version, Dig Double X, which is really, really cool. And he just has more time than I do overall. And so when it was coming to the 20th anniversary, we were like, well, we should do something. Fans have been asking for this for a long time. We have so much extra footage, and what could we do that's different? So we got in touch with Joel Guion, because he's amazing, funny, comic relief genius, really, in Dig, the tambourine player. He's always kind of like the court jester, or sort of the Greek chorus, like looking at the insanity with like a bit of a long eye. And then he's been writing. He wrote, like, he does this whole Patreon, and he wrote a book now, which is I highly recommend, of his experience inside the BJM. And we thought it would be really neat if we balanced the scales, and that we didn't just let Courtney from the Dandy Warhols tell the story, but someone from inside the Brian Jonestown Massacre. So we didn't just do a cult classic extended or up-resed or remixed. It's all of those things. It's got 40 extra minutes, but also has Joel's perspective. So it's kind of like this dueling narration now, which is it was a fun experiment to try, and David did a masterful job with it. It's coming out January. If you're in New York, January 14th and 15th, we'll be there with Q&As at IFC, and possibly the 13th at the Nighthawk. And then January 16th in LA, where I sit at Vidiots. And then it'll be expanding across LA. And then it's playing like 20 cities or more, coming out then. And also, if you're in Scandinavia watching this, it's coming out. And if you're in Australia watching this, it's coming out and then I think it's March in the UK.
I saw a lot of people talking about it on Reddit who had seen it through the Sundance Film Festival, and they were raving about how cool it was. So,
amazing. Yeah, the reviews have all been positive, and like it's better than the original, which, as you know, like why do anything if it's not going to be better, right? Like, it has to be better. So it's better apparently. And what is so cool too is the last 10 minutes. It is such a ride. My God, it catches you up from 2004 when the movie came out to 2024. So that's fun. It's fun reuniting with my brother who I shot the movie with. And then he and his now wife had their first baby when he was just 25, and he felt like he needed to get a real job. So he kind of split the project, but he's like a lexicon. He's a brilliant editor. We taught ourselves to edit together in college, and I beg him to like jump on any movie I'm making for even just a day or two. Like he edited on The New Americans, gave me like a week of time or two, but like anything he gives, it's like the other side of my brain working. And I just like feel like I should cut some cucumbers and put them on my eyes and lie back because David's editing. Yeah, it's fucking. But yeah, so super fun putting it out with him and just doing it for the sake of. So we're just really psyched that Oscilloscope picked it up, and that Dog Wolf picked it up, and Nonstop and Madman, who distributed the original Dig in Australia, where the movie's just, they're crazy about it. And we premiered at Melbourne International for our Australian premiere. We premiered at Sundance this year in January, but we premiered Dig Double X in Melbourne, and a band came crawling out of the woodwork. They're actually like really well followed there. They're called the Dandy Massacre, and they are totally amazing professional musicians who have been in all kinds of bands, and they all quit their bands and started a band 8-10 years ago just dedicated to playing the music from Dig and the band's music. They played an after party after the premiere, and we got over there at like 1 a.m. or something because the Q&A went on forever, and it was jamming. I mean, people were like dancing, freaking out. This guy walked up to me, he had like a tattoo of the bands on his arm that he'd had forever. He was like in his 20s, and he's like, I live by this movie. I drove 5 hours to come here, I was amazed. And then I requested a song, and they were like, oh, you can request whatever you want. You are our mother. You made us. You are our God. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Because, yeah, it takes a lot to like make me go, oh my gosh, but like walking home to the hotel, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like totally moved by this.
That's so fun.
Yeah, it was super fun. It was because I was just a kid, just making this movie, had no idea, like could not get arrested. I mean, I got arrested, but could not get funding for it at all. And so if you're watching this and you're like, shoot, man, she's lives the life. It's like, yeah, but not then. Like I was being repossessed, we just literally were paying for, like, we would go buy tapes, and we were so skinny that they would be like, should you be across the street at the grocery store? Like, you guys, this is like your 4th time in here this week, like buying tapes to just keep up with these bands. I was like, what we'll do? We'll film life as it's unfolding, and then we can recreate the serendipity for people. That'll be so great, Okay, yeah, but you don't shoot every minute of every day to do that, right? But I didn't know. I was just 23 when I started, so.
What I found interesting about this is, at the beginning of the documentary, there's a lot of people talking about the musical genius of the people in this band, these two bands. They obviously had like a lot of like respect from their fellow musician. It seemed like, so maybe there was some inkling of understanding that these guys were special. Did you have any idea? Because the film kind of chronicles like what seems to be like a pretty incredible ascent of these two bands, right? Like one of them doesn't get signed until halfway through the movie, and then all of a sudden, so like I'm curious, like you essentially caught these two bands on what was like a pretty amazing upswing. And I'm curious, like, did you know that was coming? Like, would it have been just as interesting had they even not achieved any kind of success? Or, like, it just seems like incredible timing, and like, very lucky to have like stumbled on two bands, because it could have easily, they fizzled out, or, whatever happens. But that's not what happened. They were putting on massive shows by the end and many records. And, I'm just curious, like, what did you understand about those bands and why were they interesting to you? And did you foresee like that they were on this upswing that made the movie even that much more interesting?
So here's the thing. If you watch Dig, the Brian Jonestown are not on an upswing. The Brian Jonestown Massacre are like a train wreck that he's so talented and so self-destructive. And I finished the movie with him in jail, no future, and if you followed their career since then, the movies played a huge part in their success. The movie actually, which he was badgering me to finish, he would like chase me down around LA and be like, when are you going to finish the movie? Like he kind of knew the movie was crucial. And the movie, which I did not make for that reason, has set both bands up for success. I don't know if both bands would be here, actually. I mean, I don't think we could ever know, but like, I think Anton would never stop making music. I don't know about the Dandies. I mean, I think, Zia would be in any band, in some band, make some band happy because she loves doing that. And Courtney's a great musician, but I don't know that he would, I don't think he'd be packing the Wiltern, you know what I mean? Or like theaters, because they haven't had albums that have sold well since then at all. Brian Jonestown Massacre, it's just, it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, they're kind of frozen in time and both lead singers are like not publicly fans of the film because they're like in Anton's case, he just made a totally absurd claim that like he never saw the film, but he completely saw the film and signed a release form and, loved the film and all that stuff. But he has been against the film for 20 years and I'm still waiting for my thank you note. But, it's been a great trajectory for him, but he's managed to clean up some and actually like fulfill some of that, and the band gets to ride around in a tour bus, which was never the case when we were making Dig. And I've attended a couple of shows because people are always wanting me to go with them. Like it's always on Mother's Day too, which is very ironic. And I went to like two a few years back and like in a row and in two different Mother's Days. And every time they played a song from Dig, like everybody would stand up like and freak out, and so I realized, oh, the film is really the thing, but people are also yelling at them to fight. And so, it's this kind of reputation that they can't get past in a way. And for Courtney, it's kind of like he's frozen in time. Like I think it would be hard to be a documentary subject because if you're like enthusiastic and jumping around in your blue underwear saying, Spain, we love it, France, we love it, like whatever, he's so ebullient and so excited about this success and he wants to be this like mystique shrouded in light, it's hard when you're in a documentary and you're just being who you are and it's lovely. It's endearing. I think personally, I think all of them are endearing actually in the film. I love them all. Like it's just this thing where they have an issue with it. And, some of the band members don't though, and came to Sundance and played with us and all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's been such a journey with that film. It's like, I wasn't filming 10 bands when it started. So I started with 10 bands looking at the collision of art and commerce. And I heard the music of the Brian Jonestown and I asked a friend and they said, oh yeah, they're alive and well, they're in San Francisco and they're, every label's interested in signing them. So I was like, oh, this fits perfectly in what I'm looking at, which is 10 bands on the verge of getting signed. And what'll happen with those 10 bands? They're about to get signed. So let's go meet them. So I went to meet him. And he immediately was like, forget about the other bands. We're taking over your documentary. We're making we're starting a revolution with the Dandy Warhols. And I was like, okay, go meet the Dandy Warhols. And he had so that was 2 weeks before they played the Viper Room and destroyed that industry showcase. Like he beat up guitar player. I'm like, what is that? He's like, blood from what? People's faces, like it was insane. That was the craziest night, at the Viper Room. And so, I mean, so crazy it got spoofed by the Gilmore Girls, word for word, which is in Dig Double X, which is a fun thing. We got to play with like how Dig influenced culture and how things changed over time. And like, so we cut to like cultural references here and there, which was particularly enjoyable to do. But yeah, so that, he's like, go meet the Dandies. And I'm thinking, you're not taking over my documentary, but I will go meet the Dandies because they just signed to Capitol. That would be kind of cool, to have a band that just signed. And so he lies to them, tells them that I'm like some editor, some filmmaker, no, a journalist from Spin magazine, I think he said, or Rolling Stone or something. And I go up there, and the first moment I have with Courtney, he says, I sneeze and hits come out, and I'm just like, oh
I
my
saw
God.
that.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy, and Anton was right. Like within 6 months, he had taken over the documentary. It really was more interesting to look at the dynamic of these two lead singers who each wanted to have what the other one had, but couldn't quite possess, like Anton with his prolific songwriting and his like troubled genius self and riding that edge, and Courtney with this, ability to find the microphone and use it and get success and compromise and play the game enough to make it. At no point was I thinking, oh, the Dandies are sellouts or, they're great. They've made great music. What I loved was that I could actually really enjoy the music of both bands. And what's insane is that they're both still alive and still together and still making music. Like that is, of course, the Brian Jonestown has had like 100 members since then. But as long as Anton keeps Joel in the fold, you get this feeling of like, oh, they're all still together. I mean, Matt Hollywood has sued him. Jeff Davies has sued him. Like most of the original lineup has sued him and succeeded in suing him for money and music rights and stuff. But he, as he says in the film, is the Brian Jonestown Massacre. And he's still alive, even though he just had open heart surgery. So like, amazing, right? Like unbelievable. I've made so many movies and I would think so many other films, everyone would be alive, and this film, people would have died. But no, it's other films, people died, and this film, everybody's still alive, except for Sophie, Anton's girlfriend in the film, who died of a very sad, very tragic blood infection when she was giving birth to her son. And you will see that in Dig Double X.
There's like this dualism in your ongoing work then too. Like it's there in Dig between the sort of the distinction between these two figures and these two bands. But it seems like, you've got these films that are really about a kind of like hyper mediation and what it does to people's personalities or how those personalities come through when they're hyper mediated. I'm thinking about The New Americans. I'm thinking about the Russell Brand film. And then you have this other films which are like really these deep looks at, sort of people and love and care, the sort of like, and like are vastly away from the hyper mediated world and really about, human connection and the capacity for people to connect. And in that category, I'd put Last Flight Home, I'd put The In Between, and probably All God's Children as well, even though I haven't seen it, but I imagine that's sort of like
a lot of recent films.
Yeah, more recent. But it's interesting that there's this kind of like, these kind of dual trajectories that I was listening to you describe Dig as like your early kind of teeth cutting development film. It's like there were these kinds of two personalities there, one the kind of like self-destructive individual about the music and about the talent, and the other one who's there able to like play the game and the mediation, and they're kind of at war with one another, and those two sensibilities kind of bear themselves out in your subsequent filmmaking in various different ways. I mean, it's a little bit of a read, but it's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, that like Dig continues to kind of have this effect as it moves on.
Yeah. I mean, and we live in public, I think,
Right.
obviously talk about mediation and talk about, being in that bunker in Manhattan over the turn of the millennium and seeing how people traded their privacy and their freedom really to be where it mattered at that moment in time, and to be on camera and to have their own,
Right.
Channel and to have their own, it was just kind of like, yeah, it's really the impact of the internet and predicting what that would do to us was transformative. And it's probably my favorite film behind Last Flight Home in that regard, because everything has come true from that film. And Josh Harris to this day says 2026 will be when we're subsumed by the algorithmic cloud. And he has said that for years now. And now people are like, uh-oh, AI, I'm being replaced. Oh my God, it's taking over everything. Like, what's going to happen? And Josh was like, oh, this is going to happen like a decade ago. So, it's been really awesome to be in touch with Josh over these many years. Very different reaction to the documentary, a much more sane reaction to the movie I made for him. Great, not necessarily grateful, but like
what's Russell Brand's response been so far?
Russell completely, like, first he freaked out. He demanded I make changes to the film, that it was too personal. I made changes to the detriment of the film until I couldn't anymore. The changes became like too damaging to the actual narrative. And I had a responsibility to the investors who had, I was the sixth director. I made it a completely new film, but I was the sixth director that these investors had invested in. So I had the responsibility of like millions of dollars that they had spent over the years chasing him around the world, of which I used 3 minutes or 2 minutes of him and David Lynch, him and Mike Tyson, that 3 minute segment. You've seen Brand, A Second Coming? Crazy. That's my mom's favorite movie that I've made besides Last Flight Home. She loves that film. And I
Why?
have to say, it is
Because
really fun.
because she likes Brand, or because she doesn't like Brand?
Oh no, she likes Brand. She
Okay.
likes Brand. And I mean, Brand has come to me and said, I'm sorry for turning his back on the movie. The day before it opened South by Southwest, the first documentary in a decade to open South by Southwest, he wrote an open letter, private note to me, open letter on the internet saying that I'm a lovely person and a wonderful director, but that he can't stand in front of a movie. I don't know if this is the private note or the public note, but he said he couldn't stand in front of a movie. This is private, where he's fighting with his father on camera and sell popcorn like it's a piece of entertainment. His relationship with his father was so fraught and really so damaging emotionally to him that I understand on some level that is hard. I mean, we were supposed to spend the entire day filming with his father, and we got 10 minutes, and that's all you see in the movie is like 3 minutes of the 10. Like, he then kicked me out of the van again. So I understand that. And we had our big fight. Like, we had a huge fight that night, and like it was raining and the wind was blowing in London. And I was like running off. I didn't even know if we'd continue making the film, to be honest. We had the big interview the next day, which he showed up for. But yeah, he ended up not showing up to the premiere of the movie, which, created, I think 200 articles came out of that. And then no one would buy it because he was the face of it and he wouldn't show up. So he never tweeted about it. He never said anything about it. He buried it. And then he came to he moderated a screening of Last Flight Home in 2022 at BAFTA, which is, the British Academy.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I want to apologize to you for what I did for that film. It's the best thing that's ever been made about me. And I said, well, it's not too late. It's a film. Like, you could go, you want me to go tweet about it now? I'm like, why not? Like, I only made it so that 10 million people could save a lot of time in their lives.
You could still sell it.
Right. Well, I always make movies for a reason. Like, I made Dig because I was an artist who came out here having made a film about a woman in prison in Connecticut, and it was being distorted by the industry. And I wondered, as an artist, could I survive and maintain my integrity, and reach an audience, or would I have to, would I have my heart broken as it was being broken by the treatment of this woman's story, which was my first feature, The Nature of the Beast. I mean, that's why I made it, not because like, oh, these bands are crazy and I can make something crazy. No, and I didn't make it because I was a fan of either band or anything like that. We live in public for obvious reasons. Brand was because he'd been a drug addict, a sex addict, and ultimately a fame addict, and married Katy Perry and came up empty with all those things. And he was just having this reckoning of like, wait, none of these things actually feed my soul. Like, I actually need to do meditation and look within and maybe get involved in issues that are bigger than myself. And he was just developing a show and he's begging me to come to it and all this. He like recruited me to make this film, by the way. And when I say sixth director, I was sixth behind Oliver Stone, Al Maisels, like Clay Tweel, like I'm forgetting even more, just big names, right? And they hadn't been able to finish the film about him. So like they called me the Ondinator, and the first thing I did was get creative control, which I wouldn't go to England unless he signed that. And he was like, why do you need that? I'm like, well, there's a trail of six directors. So I was able to finish the film. But yeah, when I didn't make those final changes for him, he stood out. But what I was going to say about his trajectory is that one thing I did was he was developing this show about comparing himself to Jesus, Malcolm X, Che Guevara, and Gandhi. And so the whole time, the narrative is like, we're looking at all the things that led him to this place of like, okay, I really deeply need to, think about doing something that matters more than drugs and sex and fame, like, because fame is so cheap, this tabloid fame, but
Yeah.
he was going for this kind of iconic fame, right?
Yeah.
He was going for like Gandhi or Malcolm X. The comedy show was him walking in their shoes in a way, like comparing himself to them with his trivial acts that he's done. So it was very fun. He's taking the piss. But he was also kind of comparing himself and kind of trying to be that guy. So I think the bigger issue that he might have had with the film is that I never shied away from the narcissism and he even admits it himself at the end of the movie. You know, he says, I'm a narcissist, but I'm your narcissist, at his like revolution that he was throwing.
Right.
But I loved that about him, you know, and I loved that we held that duality and it wasn't hagiography, you know, and it's not like the movies that are going to come out about him soon that are going to be like devastating to him, that everybody's been at my front door asking me to participate in, taking him down, which as a documentary filmmaker, I'm not going to do that. But at the same time, like it's not like this puff piece either. And I think he wanted it to be more of a puff piece, and
yeah,
I'm not going to do that either.
It's because it seems so striking to go from dealing with personalities like that, where they're sort of like driven by this like incredible megalomaniacal narcissism, you know, but they're still human beings. They've still got emotions. They've still, you know, they've got tortured pasts of one sort of another. So you go from a movie like that to All God's Children with your sister and these people who are probably like the opposite of megalomaniacal narcissists. You know?
Yeah,
like,
let's talk about it. I really want to talk about these two new films because it isn't normal for me to premiere 3 movies, or really anyone to premiere 3 movies in a year, and not necessarily wise either, especially while I'm shooting 2 movies right now. And I've been in 12 countries this year. I've been in Europe at least 10 times this year, and Germany 5. But yeah, we're heading to Rome in January to keep shooting. We're shooting. We're shooting 2 incredible films right now, both of which, thankfully, I won't be premiering in 2025. Yeah. So we did Dig Double X in January. The In Between premiered at Woodstock in October. And then All God's Children just premiered a few weeks ago at Doc NYC. It was the centerpiece film in New York. And All God's Children I've been making for 5 years. And it's about my sister, Rabbi Rachel Timoner, who you know from Last Flight Home. It's a very different aspect of her. And I had been making this film from well before Last Flight Home. So 5 years in the making. In fact, from November 2019, I started when she sat down. I started with her earlier that year, but I was making a short film about her called Rebel Rabbi because she's so amazing. And she's been arrested like 8 times that year. And, you know, I'm like, wait, you're the senior rabbi of the biggest synagogue in Brooklyn. You're Senator Schumer's rabbi. Like, how are you in jail for the Dreamers? And now you're in jail for ICE, like against Amazon. And, you know, like all these protests all the time. And so I thought, you know what? I make movies about impossible visionaries, people who take on the impossible and act impossibly. Why am I not making a movie about my own sister, you know? So I started filming her, but then she sat down with this Reverend Dr. Robert Waterman, and said, how do we make peace in Brooklyn? You know, there's racism, there's anti-Semitism, there's deed theft, people are stealing each other's homes. Like, there's so much tension between our communities for like 100 years now. Can we do a partnership? Can we get together and can we talk and promise that we will worship together, we will talk together, and everything and anything that comes up between Antioch Baptist Church and Congregation Beth Elohim, like the oldest Black Baptist church and the biggest Reform synagogue, we're going to start becoming family. And in families, you can't walk away, right? Like, you can walk away, but you have to show up again the next holidays. They vowed not to walk away. And that was the crucial move. Because what happens in this movie is so crazy. It's like so tumultuous and insane. And I didn't know what would happen with the premiere of the film. Like, I didn't know what, first of all, the election happened, you know, November 5th. And we were like trying to get press for the movie and let people know that the movie was going to open, but there was no way with the election happening. And then the election happened. And it was devastating for a lot of people. And then our movie was sold out at this like gorgeous, you know, I don't know if you know Village East Angelica.
Yeah, of course.
Theater One, the Yiddish, it's like a historical Yiddish theater, like all these balconies and this actually Star of David on the ceiling. And it's all like gold embossed and red velvet and 160 seats, lines of people trying to get tickets, sold out, sold out. And the biggest standing ovation of my career. Like I'm standing there with Rachel, the Reverend. None of us had any idea how this would be taken. Because here I am, like, what, it's cancel culture time, and I'm white, I'm Jewish, I'm the sister of the rabbi. Who am I to make a film about these two groups? Everyone felt it was so balanced. I mean, I had Black filmmaker consultants. I had executive producer Trayvon Free, who came on board, who's an Oscar-winning, amazing filmmaker who loves the movie and was there to support it. And, State Senator Zellner Myrie did the Q&A, and really he's in the film. It was just remarkable. It was remarkable. And ever since then, it's been like reviews that call it, an edifying parable for our time. That's like Variety, and powerful, thoughtful, Deadline, like just embraced. And I think it's and people have said in the reviews, they end with like, some of them end with like, it's a dark, dark time in our history. And as Harris said in her concession speech, it takes the darkest night to see the stars, and all God's children reaches for those stars. And so I just feel like it's such a timely, healing film again, that I just feel like a little bit like Forrest Gump, and that I've stumbled into releasing the film exactly when the world needs it. Very, very grateful for that, but really not happy about the election, but grateful about having, the timing work, because these two groups have worked so hard to have a partnership and a dialogue. And they were many times I didn't think we'd finish the film, especially around Passover, Easter. And, as my sister muses in the film, maybe worshiping together wasn't the best way to start, but they really show up for each other. And many times I tried to finish this film and then something else would happen, like October 7th.
Well, October 7th happened, right? I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And I'm so, sorry about everything that's happened since then. And my sister's stance on the occupation and the war, I think, is really important for everybody to know. She's extremely pro peace and negotiate, and doesn't believe that. And she says in the film, land is not owned by people, it's owned by God.
When did you finish editing that film, and sort of have it in the can ready to go to release?
Like 10 minutes ago. We created the DCP like 2 days before it premiered.
Before it premiered? Yeah. So
yeah.
Just
in fact,
happened.
I finished the film 2 days ago or 3 days ago, because it played again at Congregation Beth Elohim on December 11th. UTA is working on selling it, and we have some interest, and all of that's happening based on the cut that played. But what happens is you premiere a movie and then you realize you have to change a few things. Yeah. So some shots need to be traded out, some credits need to be fixed. So we actually just finished the film 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah,
amazing.
September 10th.
Yeah,
on Monday.
Because the last year must have been just like a roller coaster, because so much have changed and so much upheaval, and
upheaval, and then the partnership almost broke apart again. Came back stronger together. The temple was vandalized. The Reverend shows up, like it. And then some of our funders were like, well, you should catch up on the partnership now that the war is 8 months in. So it was like, it wasn't enough to cover the war at first.
Right.
Because now history's happened. So I'm like, we have got to get this film out before anything else happens, because I cannot fit anything else into a feature-length film. But also, like, I don't want to take away from talking about the in-between, because I have to tell you, like, we made that film because it had to be made. Like, there is no film that I know of that is uplifting about the homeless. And this is that film. It is a film about the only hospice for the homeless in America where recuperative care is also offered and supported. And when they heal, they come out and they get housing, and they're supported and they find community. It is a solution that is a model that needs to be spread. And both of these films provide solutions. Like, they provide visions of how it could be. And I think, All Gods is being embraced right now because our world is so divided and nobody talks, to each other. And these guys stay in the conversation no matter how difficult it gets. And the in-between, it should be everywhere. And thankfully, we just had an exciting meeting with the LA Times, and they're going to partner with us to put it out.
That's great.
everywhere.
Did the in between come out of your work on Last Flight Home? I mean, given the sort
It
of
did,
closeness.
but my mother saw an article in the LA Times, and she gets her little clippers out, and she's on her couch with her clippers, and she clipped out this article, and then I carry articles around until I read them. And so one day Morgan walks in and she's like, "What are you reading?" And I'm like sitting up in bed, like my little glasses on, like reading this article. And I'm like, "Oh my God, babe, you have no idea. Like, this place sounds unbelievable. It's called The In Between, INN Between." And if it is as cozy as it sounds, like I said, they're not homeless anymore. And they have like a resident council where they have like a president and a vice president and a treasurer, and they're like running the place. If this is what it is, we have to make a short film or something to like spread this model. So we made the barometer cats and dogs. If they have cats and dogs, we're in. So we walk in there, we're on our way to Sundance 2 years ago. And we are like, what's in Salt Lake City? And so we got in touch ahead of time, and they're like, "No, we'd be thrilled to have you." I said, "Okay, well, I usually come in shooting, so I'm going to come in cameras rolling and we'll see what we find." And so we went in, and there was this like cross-eyed dog named Boo Boo, who's like a resident dog. And then there was this like cat. There's this death doula named Kimberly, who used to be a resident because she was never homeless, but she became homeless when she went to the hospital and her roommate didn't pay the rent. And she had a heart condition that she needed a defibrillator, so she needed to plug it in. So she couldn't be in a shelter, and they sent her to the in-between because she needed to be in a facility, and she was terrified of the homeless. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm not homeless. Like, I can't believe I'm in this homeless place." And she absolutely loved the place, and then helped all of these people transition. She had a 10% chance to live herself and is totally healed. And she lives there, and she helps people to move on if they die. And she has this cat named Rogers, who is a female cat named Roger, who sits around her shoulders and walks around the facility curled around her shoulders. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't. It is such a pleasant place to be. They're not waiting to die. They're living, and they're going on field trips, and they're helping each other. They're feeling like validated humans, for some of them for the first time in 20 years or since their childhoods, and the emergency rooms don't have them coming in every 2 days, right? They're actually transitioning into homes, or they're dying, but they're not dying alone on the streets, frozen. And this is the last part I'll say, is that the tagline is where miracles happen, because some of our characters like have way outlived their expected time. Like one of our main characters had 6 weeks to live, terminal stage 4 lung cancer, and in the course of filming is declared free of the disease. Like, that's what happens when people are treated with respect and dignity. And it's just basic, and our society is only as good as how we treat the least fortunate. And so hopefully this film, we couldn't fit it in a short, so we made a short feature. This light, and see if I can balance this. I know you guys are having like strange lighting. We've been talking so long that the sun is setting. But yeah, no, we made it a very short feature, 70 minutes in length. So yeah, I hope everybody will watch it. It's really, and I hope everybody will start an in between, or push their governments to watch the film to start this, because it's really important. And homelessness is, and the thing that also I'll say is that everybody felt like they're our friends now, and it's like meeting relatives when you see these people, because they're not homeless, they're like cozy and they're sheltered. So it's a very different way of meeting the homeless and hearing about the problem of homelessness. Yeah, that's what makes it kind of unique.
And I have to go soon. First off, to all of our listeners, go check out Ondi's 20 films she's made over the years, but certainly The In Between. Check out All God's Children, and check out Dig XX coming out soon. Ondi, do you have time for one more question?
Sure. My battery on my laptop says low, so if I end up like dropping out, and I'll say bye for now. But yeah, what do you got? We'll try to answer.
So, our podcast and our company, is focused on the world of fine art. And oftentimes artists with works in various museums. And so something that, an achievement of yours that I think is super interesting, is that the Museum of Modern Art in New York bought both of your films that won the Sundance Grand Jury Prize. Share your thoughts on the idea of a museum acquiring your films, and what does it mean to have your work considered important enough to sort of add to the annals of art history?
Yeah, I almost fell off my chair I mean, we had gone through winning Sundance, by unanimous jury, and like that was thrilling and surreal. Obviously, it was 2004. It was really the kickoff of me being even known at all, for my work. Super grateful for that. But then we're at New Films. I almost said New Americans, New Films, New Directors, which is a festival in New York that's put on by Lincoln Center in partnership with the Museum of Modern Arts. And we were at dinner, and the woman from the Museum of Modern Art was like, "Hey, we'd love to acquire Dig for our permanent collection." And I literally, I had never heard something so incredible. Like, I was just like, what? It was really mind-blowing and very much an honor. And then We Live in Public, our New York premiere, was actually at the Museum of Modern Art in both theaters and on a live webcast, because we had to do that in 2009 just to kind of show that we could. And again, like, just so thrilling, to be part of that. And I don't know if you know that I made a scripted film that I wrote and directed starring Matt Smith about Robert Mapplethorpe, called Mapplethorpe, which, if you want to check it out, you should see Mapplethorpe, the director's cut. That is on Amazon. You can check it out there. You should see the director's cut, because the original also was selected for Sundance for competition to win my third. I was ready to go win my third in the dramatic competition, because I'm disqualified apparently in the documentary competition. So I was like, okay, this is going to be amazing. We had our premiere lined up. We shot the movie in 19 days in 35 locations, all on film, Super 8 and Super 16 millimeter film. Nancy Schreiber shot beautiful film. Matt Smith's performance is unbelievable. I wrote 52 drafts of the script. And we don't really know why, but the executive producer pulled it out of Sundance before it could premiere and recut it and put it in a weakened state at Tribeca. And so the official version is not my cut. It is my film. It's beautiful and the performances are amazing, but it isn't my cut. So my cut, you can see, actually, they allowed it to be released 3 years later. Somebody gave them money to free my cut. So yeah. So check that out. It was painful. That whole part was painful, but talk about fine art. Your listeners should know about Mapplethorpe, the director's cut, because he was arguably the most controversial artist in our history. And he really sort of transformed the way we see LGBTQ and also life, and also religious iconography. And I think that, it's very pertinent still to this day. And what I tried to do with the film was really to bring his interior life, which is why you have to see the director's cut, because it's a nonlinear experience of, he was an altar boy in the Catholic Church and was gay. And so, like, some things that happened to him as a kid really colored the way that contrast that he shot in his life. Like, he would take religious iconography and turn it into high art. I mean, he would turn religious iconography into sexualize it, and then put like guys in like full S&M and shoot them like Cain and Abel, So it was kind of like this duality that he did that I think was about him wanting to be loved. And at the end of the day, Jonathan, to answer your question about all my films, whether they're mediated or not, Brand wants to be loved. My dad needed to understand that he was loved. At the end of the day, no one wants to be the subject of racial hatred or anti-Semitism, and both are so much on the rise right now. And by partnering together as in all God's children, we can be so much stronger, but we have to like not allow the forces at work to divide us, and the internet does that a lot, but we should try to use it for good and to come together and actually listen to one another. Even if hate is coming at you, try to listen and then stay in the conversation. Try to take care of people like in the in-between and look at homelessness differently, because we could all be there in a flash, Same with Mapplethorpe. He just wanted love, At the end of the day, I think that having our feeling like we need our lives to matter is a real big theme in my work, and love, what we'll do for it, which is in both cases, we'll give up everything for both. So,
well, I think there's no question your work has made a huge impact. That's why they call you the Ondinator. And amazing visit. You have so many stories to tell that I'm going to have to insist at some point that you come back on the pod.
I would love that.
Usually
it's
have a
been
segment.
so enjoyable.
We have a segment at the end called the More Opinion segment, but I know you have to go, so we'll save it for next time.
What's the segment?
It's called
More
More Opinions,
Opinions.
and we just ask a few questions not related necessarily to your work, but just opinions
Ask
about
one
something.
quick, and hopefully the computer won't die.
All
I
right,
don't have
we'll do
to-
the best.
What
We'll do the most fun
if you
one.
could steal any work of art and have it for yourself and your own appreciation, but you can't share it with anybody else, what work of art would you take?
Wow, hard one. Let me think. Go to the next question. And I don't want to answer in a way that, I want to answer with the truth. And I just,
No, the other questions are gonna take much to. Give us what's another. I mean, I think all your documentary projects are really about other projects that are worth paying attention to. So we have one where we talk about like, are there any other artists or other creators, other people's projects that you wanna point or highlight or make more well known to people. But I think like the in between and the work that your sister was doing and All God's Children. I mean, this is like your much of your documentary work is basically just an answer to that question that we often ask many of these people.
yeah, I want people to see my films.
Yeah.
That's what I make them,
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, I wish I could answer with a more extraordinary answer, but I'm sure people have said Van Gogh, but I just, there's several works that he made back in the day that I would love to have here.
We haven't. I don't think we've had a Van Gogh yet. We haven't had a
Oh,
Van Gogh
really?
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such beautiful work, especially like the color. I actually think the landscapes. I'm thinking of one, and I think, did I see it the Norton Simon, or maybe I actually saw it in Amsterdam? But it's like of a field, and it's just beautiful.
We
I keep
might
this
have fallen
one
in love with
here.
the same painting. I saw a painting
This
at the
painting
museum in
behind me
Amsterdam.
is up to remind me. It's Bowie, and it's up to remind me that don't worry, you can always transform, you can always change paths, you can always, even if you've been a filmmaker, you can open a restaurant, you can make different kinds of films, you can do whatever you want, and that I feel like the way that Bowie did that and was never scared to do that is a great reminder. So I always keep that there to remind myself of that.
Yeah. All right. Let's let you go.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andy.
Andy, thank you.
Really
so much.
appreciate it. Have happy holidays. When is this
Happy
coming out?
holidays.
You too,
You as
and
well.
good luck with the release in January.
Thanks. I hope I'll see you somewhere down the
Yeah,
line.
we'll talk to you again next time.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.